Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede, and welcome to Facing South Florida. Shocked, but not surprised. That seems to be the way most people are processing the racist comments made by President Donald Trump regarding immigrants from Haiti and Africa. Now, I can't use the language that the president used, but I'm sure you know about it by now. It took place in the Oval Office during a meeting with a handful of senators and congressmen to discuss DACA and immigration reform. The president tried to deny he made the comments, but he has no credibility. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin described the meeting in detail.
As Senator Graham made his presentation, the president interrupted him several times with questions, and in the course of his comments, said things which were hate-filled, vile, and racist. I use those words advisedly. I understand how powerful they are, but I cannot believe that in the history of the White House, in that Oval Office, any president has ever spoken the words that I personally heard our president speak yesterday. You've seen the comments in the press. I have not read one of them that's inaccurate. To no surprise, the president started tweeting this morning denying that he used those words. It is not true. He said these hate-filled things, and he said them repeatedly. When the question was raised about Haitians, for example, we have a group that have temporary protected status in the United States because they were the victims of crises and disasters and political upheaval. The largest group's El Salvadoran, the second is Honduran, and the third is Haitian. And when I mentioned that fact to him, he said, Haitians? Do we need more Haitians?
Now, that's a long way from comments Trump made during the campaign when he visited Little Haiti.
Whether you vote for me or you don't vote for me, I really want to be your greatest champion, and I will be your champion.
With champions like him, who needs enemies? But as I said at the outset, all of this is shocking, but not surprising. Joining me now is Miami-Dade County Commissioner Jean Monestime. Commissioner, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure, Jim.
You are the first Haitian American elected to the Miami-Dade County Commission. You rose to be chairman. You're a commissioner now. What was your reaction to President Trump's comments?
Well, Jim, I'm certainly, as all Haitians, very insulted by the comments made by Mr. Trump. I'm not just insulted, but embarrassed as an American of Haitian descent, and I've spoken since with many American citizens, those who were born and raised here and those that have come from other countries. Many of them, if not all of them, embarrassed by this president's comment. It's not the first time, it won't be the last time, but this is another storm that America has to weather.
Do you believe the president is a racist?
Most definitely. Well, you judge a president by his comment. The president is a racist, is a bigot. These are his words. We've heard it from the confirmation given by Senator Durbin, who was in that meeting. And this is not the first time the president's been able to confirm that he's a racist. I remember the comments he made about Mexicans before he started campaigning. So what we need to realize that this country cannot go any lower than this president has brought it. So I think it's about time that every American rise to the occasion and make sure that we condemn such behavior.
Are you worried that there are probably a lot of people who think to themselves, this is what Haiti is. Haiti is a sewer, for a cleaner version of what the president said. That people come from there, flee there because, you know, it's such a S-hole as he described it. Are you afraid that this feeds into that narrative?
Most people are not Mr. Trump. Most people read. Most people understand history. Most people knows of what the contribution, Haiti's contribution has been, not just to the United States of America, but to Latin America and the rest of the world, being the first freed nation by slave in this.
Haiti set an example that other Latin American countries follow.
So most people are not Mr. Trump. Most people are well-informed, well-educated. As stated by the Haiti ambassador to the United States yesterday, Mr. Trump is probably because of these comments, has demonstrated that he's mostly misinformed and miseducated.
Talk about your story. I know that you came to the United States when you were 17. You grew up in Port-au-Prince. Talk about your story and where you would have fit in Trump's vision of the world.
Well, I grew up in the countryside of Haiti, came here when I was 17 years old. I lived there alone all my life, put myself through school, finished college, went and got a master's degree at Nova Southeastern University, started a small business with $58 in the bank with the help of friends and family members, been married 31 years with my wife, and has raised 2 sons in this community who are productive citizens. One has already graduated college and working, and the other one is about to graduate this very spring. So, and I'm not just the prototype, Jim. This is the immigrants' story in the United States. This is the Haitian story in the United States. Understand, 78% of Haitians 25 years old or older have at least a high school diploma. 78% compared to 71% from the rest of the Caribbean and 62% of people born in this country. So if this is not a major contribution to this United States of America, I don't know what is. Understand, with all the challenge that we face as Haitians, 47 Haitians median income in the United States is $47,200 versus that of all the people from the Caribbean, which is $42,000, and Native Americans at $56,000. What a contrast for people that have faced so many challenges throughout their lives.
Well, really, that's the story of Haitians coming here to this country, trying to have that entrepreneurial business spirit. That's the experience that you've had. That's experience that you know most Haitians have had here.
Most definitely. And one of the things that we also want to do, and most Haitian wants to do, is give back to this country. Because for individuals like me, for whom this country has been so good, why not giving back? That's one of the reasons why I'm in public office, serving and giving back to Miami-Dade County in particular.
So Haitians aren't just here to take?
No, not at all. Look. That's the story of the United States of America, which you may know better than I do, Jim. At the end of the day, so many college professors, so many university professors, so many athletes, so many people working in the community, giving back to their individual and respective communities, so many teachers, so many nurses. Okay, visit our hospital, Jackson's, and all the private hospitals in the area. Visit our public school system. And you heard it last night, even people in the media saying, part of, they were educated in some facet or not by a Haitian teacher or not teaching either math or teaching some other skills to them.
You're a Democrat. We should acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. What do you want to see the Republicans do? What do you want to see from other Republicans or from Republicans to repudiate what the president said? One of the people who was in that meeting in the Oval Office was Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, the only representative from South Florida who was in that Oval Office meeting where these vile comments were made. What do you expect to hear from Mario Diaz-Balart? Because we haven't heard anything from him yet.
Jim, I know Congressman Diaz-Balart. I know he would not condone such a statement. I've traveled to Haiti with him, but I'd like to have him come out and condemn this statement by Mr. Trump if, in fact, he was in this meeting and this statement was made before in his presence.
What do you think the reaction is going to be? Do you think that this is just going to inflame the Haitian community and then it's going to die down, or do you think this invokes a new level of activism among Haitian Americans?
Well, look, as we've done in the past and will continue to do, Haitians will be waiting for those who support Mr. Trump and Mr. Trump himself in the ballot box. That's the way this democracy works, and that's what we're going to do. Look, this country has been through slavery. This country has been through segregation. We will go through this storm that Mr. Trump represents. So he doesn't represent the spirit of America. The spirit of America, we've learned of it. Those who understand
maybe it would be a good idea while he's in Mar-a-Lago or the next time he's at Trump Doral. My guess is there are a lot of Haitian Americans who are working in those resorts. Maybe you should spend a little time talking to them about the Haitian experience before he starts talking about it again. But I got to end it there.
But this week is some time to give him some history lesson, and I'm sure he's getting a handful.
Commissioner, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Up next, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz.